Good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. I'm Councillor Mike Baldock and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded. Am I a bit loud? The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules which are available on the Council's website. There's no planned evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits over there and by the lifts. Please don't take the lifts in an emergency. On exiting, you will be directed to the assembly point, and it is important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have announced that it is safe to do so. If anyone present will need assistance in evacuating, could you please inform me now so that we can make the necessary arrangements to assist you? The meeting determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice. Planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of a planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak having given prior notification. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that item is being debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I'd now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak. And an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting won't be following the order set out in the agenda. I will be taking any items that a member of the public has registered to speak first before moving on to the remainder of the agenda. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Elliot Jays, who is substituted by Councillor Richard Palmer, from Councillor Karen Watson, who is substituted by Councillor Angela Harrison, from Councillor James Hall, who is substituted by Councillor Chris Palmer, Councillor Charlie Miller, who is substituted by Councillor Hayden Braun, from Councillor Andy Booth, who is substituted by Councillor Lloyd Bowen, and from Councillor Peter Marchington. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Did you get that? Yeah. Okay, item 3, minutes. To approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September, minutes 287 to 291. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to put it in here because I'm not sure where else I can get it in. I was subbed on a few of these over the last few weeks, and I note certainly at the last meeting, I think the one prior to that, it was mentioned by Councillor Booth, and it's not in the minutes that I can see, about the lack of or the absence of legal services from planning committee meetings. I note they're not here again this evening. I'm just trying to understand why that is, and was that a decision made by this committee? What is the rationale behind it? Thank you.
I think we'll need to come back to you on that, on Councillor Bowen, and get a formal position for you. It will be shared with council, yes. Apart from that, other minutes okay? Can I have a proposer, please?
Agreed.
Proposed by Councillor Stevens, seconded by Councillor Clark. Simon. Okay. Item 4. Can I invite members to declare any items of disclosable pecuniary interests under the Localism Act?
I declare non-pecuniary interest on 3.1, where I am supporting the applicant. When the debate takes place, I will not be participating in the debate or voting on it. Thank you.
Okay, I shall now ask if you have any disclosable pecuniary interests, non-pecuniary interests, if anyone else has any. Okay. I'd like to remind the meeting that where it is possible that a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that a member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item, the member should declare this possibility and then leave the room while that item is considered. Okay, item 5, consider the attached head of planning report, and we're taking item 2.2 first, which is application 23/502/598/full Chalk Pit Highstead Road, Sittingbourne. I'm giving the officers time to readjust. Who's taking this one? Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. This item relates to an application for a replacement fence along the western boundary of a former chalk pit. Former quarry is the northernmost of 3 former quarries, and it's to the east of Highstead Road. The quarry itself is quite deep, and over time vegetation's grown around and in the quarry. It has a designation as a local wildlife site. The slide shows the entire chalk pit labelled 1. On the left-hand side, you can see a blue line along the edge of the quarry, and that shows the extent of the proposed replacement fencing. In the existing situation, the fence is formed of concrete pillars with wire mesh between the pillars and barbed wire to the top. This slide shows 2 photos. The left-hand photo is of the existing fence looking north along Highstead Road. The right-hand image shows the fence on the left-hand side of the photograph and is looking south along Highstead Road. The applicant has advised that the fence along the side of the road has become cut and otherwise damaged, and after numerous repairs is starting to fail. An approval sought to replace the fence. The new fence would be green in colour and of a palisade style. This is an image provided by the applicant which shows a fence of the type that's proposed, obviously in a different location, in this case within Maidstone Borough Council. It's really just to give members an idea of what these fences look like as an example. Concerns are raised in consultation responses over the appearance of the fence and its potential to impact Highstead Lane as a rural lane in the wider landscape. The concerns are acknowledged, however, given the colour of the proposed fence and subject to landscaping, the visual impact would be mitigated over time. Concern was also raised in relation to wildlife to make sure it wasn't harmed. And the conditions recommended to ensure that there's an ecological clerk of works overseeing the replacement fence to prevent any undue harm to protected species. There are real issues with persons cutting the fence to gain access to the quarries, and there are safety concerns as a result. In this case, officers have balanced the need to ensure safety as well as ensure that the visual impacts are mitigated. Proposal would help to prevent unauthorised access to the quarries, and landscaping would help to mitigate the visual impacts. Subject to conditions which are recommended to require landscaping, control of construction impacts, and prevent harm to protected species, approval is recommended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask Tim Malpas, the agent? there will be a 30-second beep.
Thank you. Good evening all. I'm attending this meeting on behalf of GH Dean & Company, owner of Highstead Chalkpit 1. This planning application has been submitted to replace a 270-metre run existing chain link fence along the Highstead Road, which over time has become significantly damaged by vehicle impact and increasingly by deliberate human interference through cutting the fence to gain unauthorised access. Despite regular patrols to monitor condition and carry out repair, maintenance from the roadside, which has an unrestricted speed limit of 60 miles an hour, keeping on top of the fence condition is becoming excessively hazardous for company staff and contractors. From the road and fence, the standoff to the chalk pit edge is relatively narrow at say 1 to 3 metres to a significant vertical drop in excess of 12 metres. The risk assessment carried out by our insurance company demonstrates that without suitable improvement to this particular fence line, it is only a matter of time before there is a significant incident following uncontrollable trespass or indeed an accident from the roadside edge while repairing the fence. To effectively mitigate against this risk, the proposal is to replace the chain link with a green 2.4 metre palisade fence, which is the same height as the existing. And we consider this to be a long-term option to provide the necessary deterrent, strength and longevity required. Vegetation will soften the appearance of the fence over time. GH Dean considers this proposal suitable and effective, and I ask you to support the proposal in the interest of safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Parish Councillor Duncan Burnett, please? Yeah, you can, if you return to the gallery, Mr. Malcolm. Thank you. Yeah, if you can, when you're ready to speak, push the large button with a red light on it and you'll get a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, officers of Slough Borough Council. I'm here representing Robinson Parish Council to raise an objection to the proposed new fence to the Chalk Pit 1 on Highstead Road. It's our opinion that the fence is of poor design and not sympathetic to the rural setting. It would be more suitable in an urban area. Existing fence is a chain link fence that allows light and views into the chalk pit and across to the area of high landscape value, Rodmersham, Milstead and Highstead Drive alleys, as recognised by Slough Borough Council policy DM24. The proposed new fence will be more of a visual barrier than the existing fence. The other policies that we consider are grounds for refusal are CP4, requiring good design, DM26, in rural lanes. As mentioned, the proposed fence is urban by design and would reduce the appearance to the designated rural lane, the entrance to Rodmersham Parish. DM29, woodlands, trees and hedges. The applicant has undertaken significant works to the trees and the hedges already, despite no mention on the application form of doing so. DM24, conserving and enhancing landscape value, conserving and enhancing value landscape. While not published in 2018, it was proposed to extend the area of high landscape value to include the chalk pits in Highstead Road. One of the statements in that report was there are opportunities to enhance the function and presentation of these areas within the LLD and the interface with urban areas. So we don't feel that that's being met by this application. and DM 2028, biodiversity and geographical conservation. The chalk pits are recognised for their wildlife and biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ward member. Would the ward member wish to speak on this one? Councillor Bonney.
Yes, thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Cheers, thank you. Members and officers, I'm talking on 2.2, the chalk pits. You should have in front of you a set of photographs which are taken by me this afternoon. So I'm just going to take you through those. I don't have an objection to a fence being put up and replaced. It's absolutely required, and I totally understand why GHD need to do this. However, I think my main cause of concern is the design of the fencing. So if you look at the first page, you will see what's there existing. The bottom picture shows a very the historic estate fencing with the really pointy, nice metal structure that is adjacent, that meets this chain link fencing. Page 2 shows you the proximity of this fence to the road. In fact, you'll see there a post that is literally about 2 inches from the road surface. And that shows you how close it is to the road. So my concern there is that design of the new fencing would be right on the road. There is no give, there is no white line down the middle of that road. It is a double S-bend. It is the only way in and out for Robertsham residents and residents of Worms Hill and Milstead and various other villages. What you should also realise is on page 3, my number C at the top there, this is the view when you come up the half-mile path. This is a public footpath, a very well-used footpath from Eden Village. Now, the choice to the pedestrian is obviously looking straight ahead, and what they will see is of an industrial fence in front of them and not the view that's there. But they have a choice to go left or right. They're on the road. There is no pavement. To go left to join the adjacent footpath, which is ZU30, will be running down the side of this site, also with this rather intimidating fence. And if you turn to the back page, that is a picture taken from Flowpass today, who have very similar green fencing. The point here as well is that in some places you'll see that the road surface and where the post is are at similar height, but it varies quite quickly up to about 2 foot. So you've got to consider that the height of the verge, as well as the 2.4 metre fencing, will take it up to over 3 metres, which is pretty intimidating.
30 seconds.
Okay, so briefly, we want a fence. I agree with the locals that this is intimidating. It will be intimidating to car drivers. I don't think it adheres to our policies. So if you look on section 6, it lists the policies. So the ones about conserving, enhancing the natural environment, the one particularly about rural lanes, I don't think this adheres to. What is your choice? Your choice is ask for an adjournment and better design, or to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Okay, I'll move the officer recommendation. Do I have a seconder? I'm looking where Councillor Booth normally sits and he's not there. Councillor Bowen seconded. Does anybody wish to speak on this item? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point first for clarification, if I may. On page 23, under the council's approach to the application, right at the bottom there, it says the application was considered by the planning committee. Has this come before planning committee before, or is that a typo?
That's an informative would be added when it gets when a decision is made out, I think. But yeah, I'm right. So that's not saying what is. That's what will be sent out.
Okay, thank you. That's clarified that one. I partially agree with Councillor Bonney on this one and the parish council. there does need to be a fence there, and a robust fence, because over the years, I know this area very well because I used to live at Worms Hill, and that was, as Councillor Bonney said, the main, or one of the main routes from Worms Hill, Milstead, Frinstead into Sittingbourne. And over the years, there have been many cars that have lost the plot, so to speak, and ended up virtually teetering on the edge, or they would have been teetering on the edge if there hadn't been a fence there. Palisade fencing, it is obtrusive. Whether that will be mitigated over, well, it could be mitigated over the time, I suppose, with planting. But I'm in two minds on this one at the moment. I think, from a personal point of view, I would recommend, and I'm putting this forward as a proposal, so if someone would like to second it or not, that this application is deferred for officers to consult with GH Dean on a better design of fence. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I've noted your proposal. I'd like to hear a few more speakers, but then we'll see if we can second it and go to a vote on that. But I'd still like to hear a few more speakers first. Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, now I know this road very well. It borders on my ward, and I've been along this road many a time, both walking, cycling and driving, and I can assure you I've never seen anybody do 60 mile an hour down there. It's impossible. It's blind bends. The fencing is, as it looks on here, right up on the road line, and the amount of hedgerows and trees that have been taken down prior to this proposal is, I think, unreasonable. That in itself is a deterrent to anybody wanting to gain access to the chalk pit. And I very much doubt whether anyone would want to stand on that road and cut the chain link fencing to get in that position. If you go down either side of the chalk pits on the footpaths and that, there's much easier access to the chalk pit itself. So I can't see how that this will help the security of this chalk pit when there's easier access around the sides and the back. Plus the fact it's an industrial type of fencing. It's a security fencing. It's used everywhere to stop people from entering compounds and stealing things. It's not the type of fencing that would be suitable for a country lane. It's very imposing. And as Councillor Bonney said, it'll be up on looks like a 2-foot verge. So it's going to make it look even higher and even more imposing. You get lots of walkers going up and down that road, and that's the side they would use if they want to face the traffic and walk, up that lane. But you're giving them no chance there. If the fencing was to be put further back, giving people a chance to jump out of the way of oncoming cars, and I've seen that occasionally coming up and down there. I do feel that the amount of hedgerow that's been taken away has reduced their security, and it's not done our biodiversity any good whatsoever. And I will be opposing this. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen, can you, as you know the road, can you get 2 cars side by side safely on the road?
Going at a reasonable speed, I would say yes, but if there's someone walking along there, absolutely not. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Palmer, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I appreciate what the applicant said. I think when I first heard what he was saying, and particularly with the safety aspects and people getting in there, I can see the benefit of having such a fence like that. However, and I think the parish council summed it up very well, and I think it is an urbanisation of the area. It's an unnecessary, and I like Councillor Clark's idea of the proposal of working with officers, and I would certainly, if it is proposed, I would second that. But I would like to also see an engagement by the applicant with perhaps the parish council and the ward councillor being involved, and then perhaps a good fence with good security could be installed, and it might not even need to come back to this committee if everyone's in agreement. So at the moment, I will listen to the argument, but I think the views of the ward councillor and the parish council have turned me towards refusal. Thank you.
Okay, I do remember similar fencing was put forward. I was being input at a site in Sheerness. Now, I think that was going to be painted as well. And there was some objection to that. Andy, what did we decide to do about the similar fencing? What were the problems with similar fencing in the Sheerness, the old depot?
You put me on the spot a bit here, but if I recall correctly, that fence, for starters, just for context for members, that site was adjacent to the train station within the built confines of Sheerness. So of course, you're looking at a different context. But that proposed a similar palisade fence. That fence was set slightly back from the front boundary of the site, was to be painted green and landscaped along the frontage as well, within a strip of about, I think it was about a metre deep for landscaping.
In front?
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, once these chain link fences, once they've had we'll call it an accident, they're not accidents, they're usually people driving appallingly. Once they've had something through them, whether it's cut the fence or not, they sag and they look absolutely tatty after a few years. I hope that, as an aside, what you were just asking about, you're not going to suggest that the applicant gives over a metre of land to have a bit of a path on, because that would be taking the mick in my view. I couldn't see what was wrong with this fence, frankly. I thought it looked nice. I thought it looked very robust. And on the basis that the existing one can't be plugged into the electric to keep people from cutting it, and they do, and they cut it in the most unobvious places so that they're not observed. I'd say unless you can plug it into the electric, it isn't just the security of the site, it's the safety of other people. And how many times have we read in the papers, oh, the council, this owner, that owner. Oh, yeah, okay, my kid broke in there, but, if they'd have had it more secure, he wouldn't have died or she wouldn't have died. And you just think, really? Really? So, yeah, I've never liked chain link fences anyway. I think they can look very tatty. I don't have a problem with this fence. And I think the time for talking to the parish council and the ward councillor would have been before a planning application was put in, working together. And that's what it all should be about. Thanks.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Did the applicant discuss obtain advice from council officers before this fence was selected?
Andy? Matt?
No, there weren't pre-app discussions.
So there's been no discussion with the parish council or the ward member about this application at all?
Only from myself talking to the ward councillor.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Henderson.
I don't think I need to carry on. If they haven't talked to council officers, then in a way they deserve the proposal to be questioned, but I still see no basis on which we can decline this.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt?
Thank you. I understand the concerns with it, the way it looks, and when you look at the moment, being able to see through, and that chain link fence almost disappears in places. But it doesn't really matter what we think personally. We've got to look at it on planning views. And I've seen fences before in countryside where I think you shouldn't be doing that, and it has been refused and it's gone to appeal and we've lost it.
and I can see this is gone down exactly the same route. It's said that it will be painted green, and we've got a condition on there saying that there will be planting scheme to make sure that it does blend in. And I think if we did refuse this and it goes to appeal, we would lose it and possibly even be found to be unreasonable because of those conditions, and it's already been looked at. I'm not so sure about the applicant not speaking to that. When reading through here and looking at the documents, it seems to be that the fence originally wasn't going to be green, and then it was submitted that it will be green. So I assume there has been some sort of discussion, otherwise probably the applicant wouldn't have changed it, or they have made a consideration to look in and make it green. So they've done that. It's something that we've shown as well. It has been put elsewhere in Maidstone, and that lane still looks rural even with that fencing that isn't green. So I think we've got nowhere to go apart from approving it, other than trying to see if there is something else that the applicant can do. And if it is deferred, I think it's worth a look. If officers haven't made those discussions already. But, sorry, if it does come back, I'm not sure we can refuse it.
Thank you. Can I just have confirmation from the officers about the changing of colour?
Thank you, Chair. So officers share the concern about the palisade fences, and originally it was sort of like the gunmetal grey, not just the metal colour. So there was a request that, first of all, it should be a colour that starts to blend in, so at least green. The powder coating is sort of like a baked on paint. It doesn't come off. At the same time, the parish and ward councillor has suggested, could it be something more like a park railing fence rather than a palisade fence? And that was put to the applicant to say, look, can you come up with a different style that's more aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time meets your requirements in terms of security? They went away and they had a look at that and came back to explain that from their perspective, it wouldn't be feasible to run with a different option. So we did have a discussion not only about the colour, but whether a different style of fencing could be accommodated, but ultimately the applicant wasn't able to agree that, which puts officers in a position we need to make a decision on what we've got in front of us. And there's no mystery about the concerns over the appearance. I completely understand where the parish council and ward members are coming from. Equally, I think given the colour, taking into account the safety concerns, and with landscaping, on balance, officers are recommending approval.
Councillor Hunt, you can come back indeed.
Thank you. So that just from what I just heard there has been discussions and it has been looked at. So if we did defer it, we'd come up with the same things. And I think as we heard their officers come up with the conclusion, they have to make a decision. And I think we need to make a decision on it. And I would be going along with the officer's recommendation if we did.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunt. I would point out that if this committee does make a decision to defer, it does indicate to the applicant that if they want a straightforward approval, they might want to take a second look, they might not, they might come back with something very similar and we will agree it. But I don't think we should preempt a decision on deferral. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. I must concur with James on his views on this one. It was mentioned in the speech that the current fence gives you a nice view over the chalk pit and etc. etc. Well, under planning grounds, you're not entitled to a view. So, actually, with respect, and it's not saying there won't be a view, because there will be. It'll be between the actual fence itself. I've seen these fences, got around my village. So yeah, if you're looking for something attractive, they're not. Do they do the job? They certainly do. I think that I agree with Councillor Harrison. The mesh fence, once they start getting cut, you end up not with a bit. You end up flapping all over the place. You are not. This application, this fence does not change, from what I can see, what is already there in terms of space. It's in exactly the same position. So with issues in terms, if there are issues with the roads, as a result of this change, there are issues with the road now. Because it's like for like, other than it's a metal rather than a mesh. I think, again, Councillor Harrison touched on this. My little cherub was such a lovely little cherub until they've broken into a chalk pit, fallen down and broken their neck, or worse. We cannot hold that, I think, as a reason for holding this application back, because it is a chalk pit. It is a dangerous area to be, and it needs proper security fencing around it. And as a mesh fence as it currently stands, I don't think that really would tick the box at the moment. So I say it's not overly attractive. It does the job. I'm going to have to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bone. Councillor Winkliff.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to this debate, obviously. I totally agree with Councillor Harrison that a green fence, railing fence, is being painted green. Looks far more pleasant than the chain link fence, which easily gets broken into. And as I think the previous speaker said, basically a metal fence basically is harder to break into, and I consider the colour green. Some thought has gone into this, so I am in favour of passing this. Thank you.
Thank you. One question that I have. Now these rural, and I hate that word because I can't pronounce it, but rural roads do tend to wear away over time. You can see that on the second picture on page B. That's where cars squeeze in to pass each other, especially on corners, especially when there's people walking in the road. How close is this going to be to the road? Is it going to be exactly the same as in picture A?
Yeah, the proposal is to replace like for like, as it were. And the setback from the actual road varies. Some places it's extremely close and others it's set back by, say, a metre or so. And based on, so the existing concrete pillars must be set in foundations of some sort. And I'm assuming that those would be removed, but the new foundations would be in a similar location. But I don't have a sort of a forensic diagram that shows me exactly from the edge of the road where the foundations would be. I mean, the applicant might be able to advise, but the best advice I could give is it's meant to be a like-for-like replacement, so it would go in the same position.
Okay, I'm just thinking, if you're walking along a fence like A, which is what is apparently currently there, that's a bit of give. There's a bit of give in the mesh, and there is absolutely no give in this palisade, whether for a car or for a walker. So I'd be interested to see how close that is to the road, but I haven't been along there. Councillor Thompson.
It was only bearing in mind what other options there might be available, because palisade's very heavy and it's quite an impact production wise. So going to a welded wire, which is slightly less heavy duty, will save about 4 tonnes. So that's quite worth bearing in mind. It's still security fencing, less imposing, sort of thing you see around schools and things like that. So whether that's an option.
Councillor Stephen, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of questions I've got here. How many break-ins have there been? So how many break-ins have there been through the fencing along Highstead Road? How many holes, how many large holes are there down there? I've never seen any large holes down there. No one would stand there in their right mind and try and cut through that fence at that part of the road. Secondly, that it states here at 7.4.2, there is scope for planting to the front of the fence to help soften its appearance and integrate the new fence into the verge. Now, if you're looking at picture B, that's impossible unless you take that fencing back into the verge. Even the foundation for that new post would incur digging up the road. And you wouldn't be able to get any of the planting to mitigate this fencing at that position unless they moved the fencing back. Now I'm concerned now that they've only looked at picture A, which would quite easily accommodate planting in front of the fence and putting substantial foundations for the new fencing. At B, that's impossible. So I'm saying that although it says there's scope, there's no scope if you're going to put it right on the verge of the road to put plants in front of it. And had they not taken down all the plants and the hedgerow behind, they wouldn't have this problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Mr. Chairman. Like for like, I picked the officer's words carefully. Like for like would be replacing the chain link fencing and the posts like for like, not changing the posts and the chain link fencing for basically what is a solid metal barrier. I wouldn't want to walk along there or cycle along there or push a pram along there or whatever, you know, pedestrian activity comes along that piece of road. Half-mile path is used quite well, as has been said by other members. And as I believe it was yourself, Mr. Chairman, said, at least if there's, you know, there's with chain link or some other sort of fencing, there is a little bit of give if someone does come whizzing round the corner and you have to jump out the way a bit smartish. With that palisade fencing, you have got absolutely no hope, and you're either on your way to A&E or you're on your way to the morgue. So I still look at this with my previous recommendation, if I can reiterate that, Mr. Chairman, that this application is deferred for consultation by the officers with the applicant and with the parish and ward councillor. And I hope I have a seconder for that.
Councillor Palmer, you were going to second it. Can I ask if you would add, if this is to be deferred, but we also consult with our active travel officer? Yeah. Okay, does anybody wish to speak to the deferral proposal? Those in favour of deferral, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You agree? Don't rely on me. Those against? 3, 4, 5, 6. Any abstentions? Okay, that will be deferred on those bases. Thank you. The next item is 3.1, 23/502-886/full Walnut Court, Sittingbourne. And can I ask Esther Owusu to speak, the applicant? Oh, sorry. Can you just hang on? I haven't asked the officer to do his presentation yet. Sorry. Would you like to do your presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, there's no update for members. Everything is as per the committee report. This is an application at a domestic property, number 2, Walnut Court, Lammas Drive, which is within the built confines of Sittingbourne and adjacent to the... Sorry, beg your pardon, I've just been alerted to the fact that my presentation hasn't appeared on the screen. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so it's an application for replacement windows and doors at domestic property at Walnut Court in Lammas Drive. The site is within the built confines and to the rear of the High Street on Milton Regis, which you can just see to the right-hand side of the aerial photo. This is the application site itself. It forms part of what was a small development of houses in the early 1990s, which is here, comprises three houses. And this shows the heritage assets in and surrounding the site. So this is the conservation area within this brown line. And you can see that number 2, the application site, the conservation area boundary partly crosses through the property and then extends adjacent to the rear boundary of the property. The buildings hatched in red are various Grade 2 listed buildings that front onto the High Street in Milton Regis. So clearly the site has some sensitivities in terms of its relationship with the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings. And when the properties were built in the 1990s, they were built to quite a traditional standard. I'll pick that up with members when I show the photographs in a minute. And quite clearly, the design was to take into account its relationship with the conservation area and listed buildings. Permitted development rights were also removed for the houses in that development. So the original planned character and appearance of that small collection of buildings has essentially remained intact. This application is to, as I say, to replace the windows and doors. There's no objection in principle to replacement, but the issue that officers have is with the use of UPVC material for the windows. The plans aren't particularly helpful, to be honest, to members, because that's not criticism. It's because basically the technical drawings don't pick up the difference in material. You're effectively seeing the same drawings for existing and proposed. And likewise, the details of the windows are similar in terms of frame sizes. But the key difference is that they are currently painted timber frames and will be replaced by UPVC. So these are photographs of the site. So the photo on the left is looking from Lammas Drive towards the developments. The application site is actually slightly hidden in that view. It's the property that sits more or less behind the tree in between the two buildings that are more prominent there that you can see either side. The photo on the right is taken from the rear within the conservation area, and this is the application property here. And you can see the back of the listed buildings on the High Street here. There's some more closer pictures of the property itself and the current timber framed windows, likewise on the rear. The applicant and their agent have referred to the use of UPVC windows nearby in the area, which they consider adds weight to their proposal to use UPVC. Members can see that in the left-hand drawing, you have the property just to the right, sorry, left-hand photo. The property to the right is an older property, which is part of an older estate on Lammas Drive. And a number of properties on that estate do have UPVC. Likewise, the building on the right is again part of that older estate. That is actually within the conservation area. If I go back to this drawing, that building that you've just seen is here, Cortland Mews. But the officer's view is that that estate was built some considerable time ago at a time when the sensitivities of the conservation area and setting of listed buildings was perhaps not given as much weight as it is now. Officers consider it's very clear that the estate or the small collection of housing that the property is within, that was built in the 90s, was built very sensitively with the use of traditional materials. And on that basis, the replacement windows should be timber rather than new PVC to reflect that close relationship with the conservation area and setting of listed buildings, and also to maintain the character of those three properties. So on that basis, the recommendation is to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now can I ask Esther Owosu to come down, the applicant? Apologies for the earlier error. Yeah, if you push the large button with a red sticker on it, and you'll have 3 minutes and a 30-second warning when you've got 30 seconds left.
Good evening to you all. My reason for requesting a change to the current wooden single glazed windows and doors to a double glazed UPVC windows and doors is to help make our house or home more energy efficient and bring it in line with the government energy policies. The new windows and doors will be to the exact design and color as the existing ones and will not change the exterior appearance of the house in any way. The existing windows have no trickle vents in place, which contributes to condensation, but the new windows will have trickle vents, which is now a legal requirement. Last winter, my family suffered with health issues from the mold and ice on the inside of the single glazed wooden windows, to the extent that my 2-year-old daughter was hospitalized for 4 days. Supporting evidence is available if required. We also experienced rain coming through the existing wooden front door. To the extent puddles were forming on the hallway floor, we had to keep a towel on the floor to soak up the water and use sellotape to help seal the draft around the door. Our monthly heating bills are in excess of £480 and are not really sustainable with the increased energy cost. My architect has checked the current boundaries, and it shows that my house, apart from the garage, is outside the conservation area. We submit this statement in the hope that the committee will look favorably upon our application. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I ask Councillor Winklis as a ward member if he wishes to speak? Well, no, he does. Carry on.
Thank you for this. Right, I paid a visit to the applicant back in January and February and advised the applicant to apply for planning permission, which they have done. I refer to 1.2, where the heritage boundary partially covers the application site, which the applicant just mentioned. I had a walk round with the heritage officer in September regarding heritage assets in Milton Regis. On this walk round, I brought up the fact the heritage line only runs through the eastern end of this property. I understand the heritage officers are reviewing the heritage line so as the property is no longer within the heritage area of Milton Regis High Street. 3.1 on the agenda, the application seeks to replace the wooden windows with UPVC in a brown colour. In my view, this would comply within the existing colour scheme. 4.2 on the agenda, no objections were raised by neighbours in the neighbouring properties. I asked the committee members if they are minded to go with officers' recommendation for refusal. They ask for a deferment or a site meeting before making a decision, on the grounds of waiting on a decision from the heritage officer on the removal of the heritage line. And I think that is the main point, that if the heritage line is moved, this property will be no longer in the heritage area. Thanks for listening to me, committee.
Thank you, Councillor Winklis. I have a couple of questions that I'd just like to clarify. I think you referred in the officer's presentation, Cortland Mews, the house that is in the conservation area. Is that PVC or not?
Yes.
Yes, it is PVC.
Yes, those windows are PVC to the property.
And can you, I don't know, might be technical, too technical for me anyway, so I'm asking. Can you get double glazing in wood?
Yes, you can. And just to
Okay.
be absolutely clear, there's no objection to the principle of double glazing. It's the material for the frames that officers have concern with.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, we've done quite a few developments and
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. You haven't moved the recommendation yet.
I've moved the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Bowen, seconding. Councillor Thompson.
okay, it's worth looking, bearing in mind UPVC, one, we're in a climate emergency, it's plastic. This will last 20 to 35 years shelf life. If you use a good quality wood window, it'll last 60 to 70 years. And bearing in mind also the cost, obviously it'll be about 50 to 60% dearer for wood. But over the long term, you've then got a saving of 250% of your cost because you haven't had to replace them again. So it's worth bearing those sort of things in mind when we look at replacing windows, whether it's in a conservation area or not. So.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, if Andy's able to put those photos back up again of the site, I understand that though the house there with the white PVC is within the conservation area, but if we look at those, what looks better? You can see that the ones that we've approved and made sure there was site conditions because of the removing permitted development rights and making sure there's wooden windows looks a lot better. And I think there was another photo where you could, that's that one on the right, sorry. You could see it with the listed buildings to the back there. And it does just blend in better with that high street across the back. And looking at that, because it's in a small cluster, all the same, I think if one starts changing it, you're going to start having everybody changing it, and that could really impact the way that looks across that whole area. So I think it's right to go down this route. As has been said, it is possible to have wooden windows that are double glazed, and the agent sent everybody an email earlier, and it's online as well, where it's pointing out that there's something that's been an application in Maidstone that's been approved that was a listed building.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen that. I don't know if all members of the committee have seen it, so I don't think we can.
Okay, well,
incorporate that.
it's online anyway, so I'll discuss it from that. But when I've looked at it, you can see that they're saying that there's a listed building that's got UPVC windows that was approved. That information was wrong anyway, that's on there. It wasn't a listed building, it's a building similar to this that's in a conservation area. And that states on there that it has got, it's actually UPVC windows, but it's conservation status windows or something. So you can get better windows that are going to be in keeping wooden or otherwise, but are matching a conservation area. So I think as it is at the moment, it's right, but something else could be done that would probably be acceptable.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really split on this one. I totally sympathise with the applicant and to the reasons why they are looking to change to UPVC. I accept the previous speakers about the long-term cost and long-term saving, but if that's over 50, 60 years, that's not going to be a benefit or likely to be a benefit of the current owners. But the initial outlay as it currently stands is of certainly concern to the current owners. Regarding the heritage line, if we ask for a deferment, as been suggested, waiting or pending the decision on that, how long is that going to take? I mean, how long's a piece of string there? I don't know.
About a year at least.
Is that reasonable for this applicant to be sitting in limbo for that length of time? I know if I was that person, I wouldn't be overly happy with that. My question, I mean, regarding the UPVC, woods, etc. UPVC can look almost, I think, as good as wood now, if not as good as things have moved on. My question for the officer, the sites. I mean, I think it's unfortunate for the actual building itself to have such a relatively small part that's actually cut by the heritage line, when the vast majority of this property is not within the site. But what would be the position if the building or the property that's in the heritage site zone that has UPVC wanted to change their windows? Would we be saying to them, no, you can't change that for like, you've got to put wood in? I just want, because otherwise we're on a bit of double standards. So I'm torn on this.
Very good question, Councillor Bone. If the house that is currently in the conservation area with PVC windows wanted to change like for like, would we accept it?
Oh, we would. Yeah, obviously we're looking at this property, which is, you know, there are different circumstances here. It's built in a different way, more sympathetic to the conservation area. It has restrictive conditions on it relating to future development. But to try and answer what you've asked, we would certainly encourage any development in a conservation area to use traditional materials, but we also would have to take into account what the existing situation is. So, of course, at the moment they have UPVC, and that is the baseline. At the moment on the application site, they don't have UPVC windows, they have timber windows. If I could just possibly clarify something which I think might be in members' minds as well about the conservation area boundary. Of course, it's not just a simple fix that if that except obviously at the moment the boundary line looks somewhat odd, the way that it runs partly through the property, and I'm sure there's a historic reason why it was originally within the conservation area. But even if that boundary is changed, there is still a setting issue, the setting of the conservation area and the setting of the listed buildings. So it's not just the case that because there is a small part of the building that is in the conservation area, that is the sole reason why it's unacceptable. The reason is also because it also further affects the setting of the wider conservation area and the listed buildings on the high street. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Bone.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the response. My only view on that, I think, from what you just said, is that we would be willing to not impose requirements on a building that is in a conservation area, but wanting to impose restrictions on a building that is not in the conservation area based on conservation. It still doesn't sit particularly well with me. I'm not sure which one I'm going to vote at this moment, so I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Okay, would the committee like to hear from the conservation officer? Yeah. Simon?
Evening, Chairman. Evening, members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. I think Andy's just covered off some of the points I wanted to make, and that in relation to the conservation area, the critical thing is that the property and the two other properties in the same scheme are within the immediate setting of the conservation area. The fact that due to the way the boundary alignment was drafted many years ago, cuts across the corner of the application properties is really fairly irrelevant here. Is the fact that it's within the immediate setting of not only the conservation area, but also within the setting of a number of listed buildings, which when Andy was showing you the photographs, you could see as a backdrop to the application property. So there's a direct relationship between the application property and the listed buildings on the I think it's the west side of the high street, and I think it's for that reason primarily the development rights were removed when that scheme was originally considered back in the 1990s, and there was a particular requirement for timber windows to be used. If you look at the difference between the application property and the two adjoining houses either side, and then the property on the right hand side of the photograph, there's a world of difference in terms of their character and style. The properties, including the application property, were developed in a sort of kind of more rustic vernacular style with traditional detailing, including sort of pitched dormers, steeply pitched roofs and chimneys. The house on the right hand side of the photo is a sort of modern sort of semi-detached property, fairly typical of the age. Andy and I are not sure the exact date of those, but we believe it's probably late 60s or early 70s. Fairly pleasant but unremarkable. So there's a world of difference between the two, which is why when that scheme was into the 1990s, you know, considerable attention was given to its design, given its very close proximity to the conservation area. So I don't think it would be reasonable to defer the application for the issue of the conservation area boundary to be, shall we say, finalised, because it's not that relevant. It's the fact that it's within the setting of the immediate setting of the conservation area that's the critical thing here. In terms of the arguments for and against sort of UPVC versus timber, clearly timber has a much higher quality aesthetic than UPVC, even though UPVC has come a long way in recent years. I can put a little bit of information up on my screen, which might be helpful to members in making a decision on this. If you just bear with me a second. I don't know if members can see my screen. There's four main reasons why timber
Simon, that's all.
Sorry?
We can see a lot of typewriting words, but
right, let me just see if I can blow it up for you. Just bear me a second. Is that any better?
Keep going a bit more. Okay, I can read that now.
So there are four main considerations which are relevant to quality of design, which is obviously a consideration in this application. And first and foremost, it's a question of aesthetics, in that UPVC, whilst it is improved, it just can't match the natural beauty of wood. As I've mentioned, its grain, solidity and ability to take paint finishes or stain finishes give a distinct advantage over plastic alternatives. UPVC wood effect windows are very much a pale limitation of the genuine article. It's clearly the case that from a distance it's difficult to notice the difference, but when you get closer up it's quite clear that there is aesthetic difference. Secondly, you've got the issue of function. There's a lot said about timber windows not being as functional as UPVC windows, but it's not really the case. Certainly in my experience, I've seen plenty of replacement timber or new timber windows which are equally as functional as UPVC, and also timber is a much more versatile material than UPVC and can be adapted as and when it needs repairing. That moves on to the whole maintenance question, just picking up on what I think it was Councillor Thompson mentioned earlier about the lifespan of UPVC versus timber. Obviously, there is a cost difference between UPVC and timber, and we can only give that limited weight as a planning consideration. Clearly timber has got the ability to last a lot longer. In fact, you find sort of surviving timber windows in period buildings of over 100 years old if they're looked after. So there's certainly a durability benefit, if you like, for timber windows, provided good quality timber is used in the first place and they're properly maintained. And then lastly, picking up on the sustainability matter that I think, again, Councillor Thompson mentioned earlier, timber, providing it's sustainably sourced in the first instance, is much more sustainable building material than UPVC is. I found some information that might be useful here for members, that approximately 82% of plastic windows at the end of their lifespan are believed to go into landfill, and plastic recycling, incineration are both underdeveloped and costly technologies. There's also the issue of the chemicals used in producing UPVC windows, which are quite harmful and unpleasant. And obviously we've got a whole issue with plastic waste, both at national and international level, and trying to deal with that is an important issue. Obviously the council has declared a climate emergency, and we should probably be thinking about this as a wider issue. There's some links there that if anybody's interested, I can send. So all of these factors of
Are you winding up now, Simon?
yeah. Have worked into my thoughts in basically advising the planning officers that we shouldn't really be supporting this application. Yes, I think we're all sympathetic to the issues that the applicant has raised, but we haven't objected to the use of double glazed windows, which will clearly assist. But we do feel it would be more appropriate for them to be timber for the reasons given. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Very informative. I next have Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I was going to ask questions along the same line as Councillor Bowen, really, because I've seen some plastic double glazed windows which you find very hard to tell whether it's wood or not sometimes. So I do feel what we're looking at, because the two houses that aren't in the area, the way I see it, you're saying even they wouldn't be permitted to have double glazed because it's the effect it has on the conservation area. But I'm not so convinced that with modern, that might have been the case in 1990 with the PVC, but I'm not so sure now, because I've seen many that it's very hard to tell if they're wood. So could we put a condition on that they are definitely, the PVC should match and would the effect the applicant says it would, and I don't see that it would have that effect on the conservation area. So I hear what everyone says. I mean, if we as a council want to issue an Article 4 directive borough-wise banning PVC windows because of the climate emergency, then that's within our gift. But I feel this application, looking at it, I feel, to me, I don't think it would have, if it's done in a sympathetic way to the conservation area, I think it's an acceptable application, and I think I would support it at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Palmer. One couple of things that have come up I'd just like to clarify. Simon said that these were built in the 90s with specific requirements, that they were timber, PVC, not to be changed. Would that sit on the property deeds, or would that be something that was known?
Well, it's they're conditions of the planning permission, so they would be evident. Obviously, the decision notice would be a public document that would be available to anybody that bought the property.
And that's not a usual thing to do, or is it? That would only have been done if it was considered. Because I'm thinking of a monstrosity that got permission in Baldon Conservation Area last year, which it was agreed would be allowed. but this is it not in the conservation area, and yet even back in the 90s, there was requirements, a requirement for it to be not PVC. So I'm just wondering how usual is that in your experience of planning permissions given by this council?
Well, the general position really with permitted development rights is that there have to be very good reasons why rights would be removed. That has to be demonstrated. Obviously, I can't sort of put myself into the shoes of the council when it determined the application in 1990, but certainly from the decision notice and the reasons given for restricting and removing permitted development rights, it was very clear that that related to the relationship between the development and the conservation area and listed buildings, and that was felt to be a sufficient reason why control over future development and future alterations was needed on this site.
Okay, so there is the point to bear in mind that we have made a particular point of that in the past for a reason. And we often say, we make points for reasons as a committee. We expect them to be upheld. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, a lot of it was covered earlier, but the other factor worth bearing in mind for the applicant is if you put UPVC in, it will devalue the property. So it's worth bearing that in mind. It'll keep better value with decent windows. So it might be helpful in the long run.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have every sympathy with the applicant and the fact that their windows are, for the want of a better word, knackered. And I do applaud Councillor Winklis for actually persuading them to put in a planning application rather than just going ahead and replacing their windows. I think we've got to be consistent with this. Going back into the past, if you like, we have been quite consistent with the fact that houses in or adjacent to conservation areas are fitted with the appropriate windows. Now, we're not saying they can't be double glazed. That's not what the officer's report says. And as it says at the end of 7.10 on page 228, the officer sought amendments to the application, but the applicant declined to do so. So it's not as if the officers haven't tried, but I think we do need to be consistent, because in the past, people have actually put in UPVC windows in buildings adjacent to and in conservation areas, and we've issued enforcement notices against them, forcing them to take them out. So I do have sympathy with the applicant, but I think in the case of this, because the permitted development rights have been removed at planning stage, and it is adjacent to the conservation area, we do have to be consistent, and I will be going along with the officer's report for refusal, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a few bits here that worry me in respect of if we were to go to, if we were minded to go down the line to say that you could only have wooden double glazed windows in there, this would be far more expensive than the UPVC double glazed windows, and we would then be asking the applicant to increase their cost so that they could improve their health and efficiency of their house. I find that totally immoral. I think that they should have the opportunity, especially as UPVC is very closely looks like wood, and I've had both wood and UPVC, and I'm sure the sustainability, the UPVC would outlast me and many others if it's maintained properly. As with wood, you have to keep either varnishing it, rubbing it down, cleaning it, painting it, maintaining it, and if you get leaks between the wood and the brickwork, it's the devil's own job to deal with. Very seldom do you get that with UPVC. And as for the climate emergency, we shouldn't be chopping down trees anyway. That's the idea of UPVC. It helps with our climate emergency. And the fact that the plastic waste and all the rest of it, we as a council and lots of other people are using the offcuts of plastic for UPVC decking and fencing, which is sustainable. And it's getting rid of the plastics that we cannot sort of just chuck in a dump just to get rid of it, and it doesn't decompose. So it's being used sensibly. I'm of the opinion that they've been put in a difficult situation in respect of surrounding houses that have white UPVC in a conservation area, and only part of their houses in the conservation area, and yet they're being penalised for that. I find that very hard to accept, and I certainly would go away from here thinking that if we did diffuse this, that we're actually putting, you know, the family's health at risk by not allowing this to happen, or we're going to charge them more to ensure that they got good health. I think that's totally immoral, and I'll be voting against the refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. I would remind the committee that expense, I don't think, is generally a material planning consideration, but I think we all know morality and law are in different planets sometimes. I've got Councillor Harrison.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Now, firstly, this council took enforcement action against a Swale Borough councillor for replacing wooden window frames with UPVC. Second, I don't often come onto this committee because instead of looking at pure planning policies and planning issues, it's become populist and it's become well, it's not to do with and emotive, sorry, populist and emotive, and that is wrong. The planning training does not say you've got to, you know, listen to people's emotional stories and make your decision based on that. There are planning grounds. Thirdly, you started touching on it, Mr. Chairman, because I did sit on this committee for many years at the request of my group. I objected to discussing the colour of the bricks, but they did discuss the colour of the frames. Members on this committee have spent many, many hours looking at conditions on planning permissions in order to get the best fit for those areas and to actually maintain some standards. This isn't like the White House, when every 4 years the staff all go out the door and the policies all go out the door and you all start again and do exactly what you want. Members over many, many years have you know, put their experience and planning training into making these planning decisions and agreeing conditions to get the best that they can for those areas. And I really don't think that it's up to us to sit here and say, well, you know, I know that's what they agreed all that time ago, but, well, really, they shouldn't have done that, should they? Let's change it. No, love. What we should be doing is enhancing any planning permissions that were given in the past, not diminishing them. And if at that time, this planning committee, and I'm pretty damn sure I wasn't sitting at that one, thank God, because I'd have had to have declared an interest. If they decided this new development is going to have all this stuff, it's going to be sustainable, it's going to have wooden window frames, I really don't think that 10, 20 years later, I'm just counting the years, 20 years later, it's for us to sit here and say, well, actually, I mean, they may have said then it's got to be wooden window frames, but, you know, we don't agree with them. No, you can't revisit the decision. Planning grounds only, not emotion and populism. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I see no more speakers, so it has been moved and seconded. Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those against? 3. Abstentions? 1. Does that add up? Did I get that right? Cool. And Councillor Winkler took no part. Okay, thank you. That proposal has been, the recommendation has been agreed to refuse. So we're now to item 2.1, which is 23/502/632/full 8 Oak Tree Close, Eastchurch. And can we have the officer to go through this one for us, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Hasn't appeared on the screen again, just bear with me. There we go. Okay, so there's no update for members. Everything as per the report. The application property is a large detached dwelling. It's located within the Kingsborough estate on the island, which is within a built-up area between Minster and Eastchurch and within Eastchurch parish. The estate's characterised by large properties on generous plots. This is the existing property. As you can see, it sits in fairly considerable grounds. And these are the existing floor plans of the property. So it's a 2-storey dwelling with a link extension to the garage. And I think part of the garage has been converted into a utility room. Those are the elevations. So the garage is 1-storey at the moment. This application seeks planning permission to increase the height of the garage and create a 1st floor in the roof of the garage and link to the main house, which members can see on the right-hand side here. We'll create an additional bedroom. In order to achieve that, the eaves height of the existing garage will be raised from approximately 2.5 to 3.6 metres, and the ridge height of the building increases, ridge height of the garage increases by approximately 2 metres. And in addition, 2 dormers are proposed on the northeast elevation. There is also another dormer which members can see on the northwest elevation, which sits in the link area between the enlarged garage and the main house. And in addition to that, there's a swimming pool in the rear garden. It's currently an open swimming pool, and there's a proposal to erect a retractable, I think it's called a telescopic cover to the swimming pool, which is essentially a glass framed structure that can be moved across the pool and back. That screen is 2.5 metres in height. So these are the photographs of the property. The left-hand photo is the site. The garage is slightly obscured by the conifer trees that have been planted. The photo on the right, you can see the neighbouring property, which has a similar garage. That one actually does have a slightly higher eaves level and dormer window. That's the garage to the site. And you can see on the right-hand side, that's the neighbouring property. And that property sits on a slightly lower level to the application site. There's a difference of roughly 1 metre. Again, there's a garage there to the neighbouring property, which separates the dwelling from the boundary with the application site. And then this is the rear of the property. This is the open swimming pool, which the property currently enjoys and where the retractable cover would be erected. Officers consider that the extension is well designed, be subservient in scale and relationship to the main house, and wouldn't be harmful to the character and appearance of the area or to neighbouring amenity, given the spacious nature of the plot, and also the relationship and distance with to the neighbouring dwelling. In terms of the cover to the pool, it's very discreet. It's at the rear of the property, and by all accounts, it would appear that at 2.5 metres in height, it would almost certainly qualify as permitted development in any case. And the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Now, East Church have called this in on the grounds that they consider it to be overdevelopment. And I note that one of the concerns from neighbours is overlooking from the dormer windows. Can you just highlight on your photo what that is considered to be, of concern to the neighbours?
Yeah, this plan's actually probably the best one to show. If members can see there, this is the proposed garage here with the dormers, and as members can see, they do face across a small part of the neighbouring property, but the dwelling itself is partly or largely obscured by the existing garage to that property, and this area of the property, if I go back to the photos, members will see that the frontages are very open in nature anyway. So the officers consider that there isn't any harmful overlooking from those dormer windows, given the angle of view from them and the fact that they face largely towards the front garden of the property.
Can you just go back to your drawing with the
site plan?
That one.
Oh.
No, carry on.
Is that the one you want?
No, it was that second one, I think. It's the one where you showed the all of the dormer windows and the neighbouring property.
Oh, okay. It's this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. If you zoom in a bit. Yeah, that's good. Would any of that be visible from number 7? If you drew a straight line from it, it seems to cut off the entire house.
When you say would any be, do you mean would you see anything of number 7 from
Yeah.
the windows? Well, I think the garage would largely obscure it. You might catch a glimpse of part of the corner of this property, but obviously most properties have some form of visual relationship with each other.
Okay.
So if there was any overlooking, we certainly don't think it's to a level that would be harmful.
Councillor Harrison.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, you haven't moved the recommendation.
I was just about to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Bryan, for seconding it. Councillor Harrison.
Okay, I don't have a problem with agreeing that, but I would also like to propose, either during this or afterwards, that in future, if councillors or parish councils call items in and have no intention of coming, i.e. whenever the deadline is for this, that the reports are withdrawn from the meeting pack and given back to officers to approve or refuse under their delegated powers, because I am sick to death of people, specifically parish councillors, every time I come here, which isn't that often, I admit, there's at least one item on the agenda where something's called in by a parish council and they don't turn up to give their reasons why. And I think that is totally bad manners, totally disrespectful to this committee. And I'd say the same if it was any councillor as well. You want to call it in, you have the courtesy to go along and give your reasons, like Councillor Winkler did tonight. So I'd like to make that proposal because this has been
Sorry,
going on for
Councillor
years.
Hanson, that is beyond the remit of this committee to make a proposal, I'm afraid.
Well, you
But
can
I-
make a recommendation to policy and resources, a motion to full council if necessary.
I can tell you
It's
that
been
is being
talked
looked
about.
at by
Oh,
the
good.
working group.
Good. I was going to say it's been talked about for many years, and it's about time it was dealt with because it's a total waste of our time and the officers' time. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak on this application and not parish council's presence or otherwise? I will stop it if it goes off into a discussion of parish council attendance. Councillor Bowen.
I'm not going to make comment about parish council attendance because I said exactly the same last month about Laysdown. But do know that it was actually from the head of planning comment on this one. My question in terms of, just want to check the pool and the glass extension. Is that going to be electric or mechanical? And if so, what potential could there be for noise? Or is it a manual and they'll just keep putting individual bits up and down, and what's the frequency? And if it is electric, because I can't see it in here, is that likely to be a problem for adjacent properties?
Andy, if you know the answer to that.
Must admit, you've caught me by surprise there. I don't know. I did actually take the opportunity to have a look at typical enclosures on the website this morning, and they did seem to me to largely be ones that were just simply moved by they were rollers basically. I suppose it could be possible to have a mechanical one if you had enough money for that as well, but I think the majority of them are done by hand using some kind of rolling system.
Councillor Hunt.
On the actual application, I think we've had these properties come for us in the past on this development, and very similar. I remember one that was like this that wanted to go around towards the garage and do an extension on the side. And the parish council at that time said that they were exactly the same thing. It was overdevelopment at the site. And I remember officers recommending that for approval. A committee turned it down and going to appeal and being approved. So we do need to consider that. I think officers have got this one right. It is a large property on a larger site and can easily take that extension. So no problem with it.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Very simply, I see no problem with development. It's making relatively modest extension, and I can see no reason to turn it down.
Okay, I see now have a hand, so I'll move you off. No, I will go to the vote. Those in favour of permission, please indicate. I guess that's 13. Those against and abstentions, 1. So that is carried. Thank you. We go now to agenda item 5. Is agenda item 5, isn't it? What happens to 4? Right. Item 5, appeals. Anything anybody wishes to say on this one? I imagine that we're all pleased that the appeal was dismissed at Cellar Hill. Firefield Lodge was a little interesting. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I totally agree with you. Delighted that Cellar Hill was dismissed. On a slightly different note, very disappointed at another decision by the inspectorate to agree the 10 houses on Linstead Lane. Similarly, I think that is an absolutely disgusting decision. Thank you.
That will be reported next time, and you'll be able to say it again. I think we will share your anger. Councillor Speed, do you wish to comment on Cellar Hill, as I believe that you might have been in the press on this one?
I just wanted to make the point that Cellar Hill is in Linstead, not in Tenham. Thank you, Chairman.
Point very well made. Right. On that basis, say good night. Thank you all, and Be here soon.